Welcome to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Happy to have on Adam Finkelstein, Director of Recruiting at 24/7 Sports. It's still been a busy time in college basketball as we don't seem to get any breaks. We joke about that all the time. Adam, but how are you, man? Seems like you've been busy.
Yeah, doing great. We got rankings, we got draft stuff, and the recruiting period's coming this weekend. So everything's busy but fun.
Well, we've been consuming your new rankings out for 24/7 Sports in the class of 2025 and 2026. Of course, Illinois
Yeah,
fans.
they suck. Huh? I mean, what are those guys doing?
Yeah, let's get it out of the way. I mean, the Illinois effect is in effect, right? Like whenever an Illinois guy commits to Illinois, all of a sudden he drops in the rankings. That's what everyone knows.
Is that a thing? Is that I've heard that from some fan bases, but I didn't realize that was the trend for Illinois. Yeah, I mean, Brad Underwood must have offended one of us at a previous stage or something. I didn't realize that was a thing. I'll have to pay attention to that.
It really wasn't a thing this time, though, Adam, because Jeremiah Fears moves up 4 spots into the top 40. And then Will Riley, who's announcing on Sunday, and it sounds like Illinois is in a good spot there, moves up to number 9. So just what do you think of those two prospects that we expect to play in the orange and blue?
I think he will very likely end up in our 2024 rankings. We're kind of, is Travis reported on our 24/7 Sports show yesterday, we're kind of anticipating a reclass there, or certainly curious to see if that's going to come to fruition. But if he stays in 25, he's really earned that top 10 status. He's been someone who's, been ascending for the better part of the last year. I loved him during the high school season. He got a big jump there, and then he's played great to start the spring EYBL season, putting up huge numbers. And, the thing about Will, quite honestly, is that like he's not even a finished product yet. So there's still untapped upside to go as he kind of smooths out some of the edges in his game and fills out his body. So I think his best basketball is still ahead of him. And that's why, I get the urge to reclassify, especially in this era of NIL. But in some ways, he'd be better off like staying in 2025 just for his own development. But he's been great. Fears is an interesting one, quite honestly, because when you look at his numbers, both in EYBL and with USA Basketball, he's not shot the ball well. So that was a conversation. But I've seen him enough to just say like, hey, I just believe in the amount of game that kid has with the ball in his hands. So yes, he does have to shoot it more consistently, but there's nothing in his mechanics that suggest he won't be able to do that. And he's just got so much ability with the ball. He can score it at different levels. He can play make in a lot of different ways. So I just think that at some point you just have to say like, hey, he's got a lot more game than the rest of these guys. So that's why he made a little jump. Although candidly, it would have been a bigger one if the shooting numbers were a little higher.
To follow up on that, Adam, it does feel like coming up as a prospect, he's been known for his scoring and his ability off the dribble with the handle for sure. But it feels like over the last year, and I'm curious if you've seen this as well, his playmaking has elevated. Some of the reads that he makes, the passes that he makes. I don't know. He's still listed as a combo guard. I think that's accurate because he can play both on and off the ball. But do you feel like he's progressed to the point where he can make some ball screen reads and maybe be more of a, I don't know if he'll ever be a pure, true point guard, but I feel like that's come along a little bit over the last year from my vantage point.
I think it's more about mentality than it is ability with him, especially early on, to your point. I mean, there were times you'd go watch him and he would really hunt shots. I mean, really settle for some tough ones. So, lots of times, I shouldn't say lots of times, sometimes the difference between a point guard and a combo guard is it comes down to mentality. How do you want to play? And sometimes it comes down to how are you capable of playing? I think he's capable of playing like a pure point guard. Certainly that's what his older brother was. He's got more of that scoring DNA than his brother. And so, I think where it rounds out is like some type of like scoring lead guard, exactly how that works. That's more nuanced than whether you call him a PG or a CG. You know what I mean? It's about roster construction, who you surround him with, and how you best utilize him on the floor. I think allowing him to be aggressive, looking to score and play make is where he's going to be at his best, but you've got to surround him both with people who can space the floor. So he gets the floor spacing, the people who can shoot the ball. So he gets the floor spacing to do what he does best. And then candidly, like I think some unselfish ball movers are going to be helpful for him too, because he just by nature is kind of a high volume guy.
To bounce back to the Will Riley side of things, I'm curious, as you assume, and we do as well, a move to 2024, what goes into that from the ranking standpoint to evaluate how a shifting class may affect where he's ranked? Do you think he would be still a 5-star talent in 2024? I know that's what a lot of Illini fans are asking, assuming that he does make that jump.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So a couple of things. I mean, basically rankings are based on like 3 main variables, and it's hard to synthesize those down into just one number. But these are the 3 things that we're basically considering. What's the long-term upside? And obviously reclassification doesn't impact that. That's the big, especially at the top of the class, that's the biggest consideration. Second biggest consideration is what's your immediate college impact? Now, reclassification does impact that. So that's why very frequently when a kid reclassifies, you see him drop, because his impact right away next year as a college freshman is not typically as strong as it would be a year later. There are some exceptions to that. The recent one, Aswin Erhunwunsi, who reclassified to Providence, and that was a poorly kept secret, but he's the same player now that he would be a year from now, because he's fully developed physically, so that he really didn't take too much of a decline. As I said, I think Will in many ways could benefit from going back to high school and filling out his frame. I think his impact would be better a year from now than it would be at this moment. But that's typical. And then the third variable that we consider, but far less so, is like what has been the level of productivity so far. So, and that really informs the first 2. So basically we're trying to project what you're going to be down the road. As I say, it's a futures market. This is not who's the best AAU player right now. This is projecting a futures market. And half of that is the immediate return as a college player. So that's why typically you do see rankings go down. And then the other piece of that, quite frankly, is the players we are comparing them to change. You know what I mean? When you look at where someone gets ranked, you're comparing them to other players in the class. And we first start with positionally. We say, like, okay, let's say Will does go ahead and reclassify. All right, how does he compare to the other wings in now the class of 2024, both from a long-term upside perspective as well as an immediate impact perspective in college? So that's basically the calculus that we do, especially when somebody reclassifies.
Would ask you that. Obviously, I think an 18-year-old who's got a slight frame, the reclassify, I think the expectations aren't quite what a 5-star would be if he was a 2024 guy that's maybe 19 years old, whatever it is.
Right.
But Adam, what do you think his impact could be as a true freshman on the 24-25 season? Do you have any comp of what you've seen in recent years of the type of player that he could be as a freshman on a team that's got a lot of talent on it?
Yeah, I think that it's, I'm not really quite sure, to be honest. I think a lot of it is going to depend on the physical maturation. I will say this, just like, listen, he's top 10 in the country. We're obviously very high on his talent. It's well documented from me in particular, going back into December and stuff, how high I was on his ability. But the physicality piece is going to be really important. And the thing about reclassifying is, if you go back and look at this from a historical perspective, which I do because I'm interested in how the trends impact development of players, reclassification is usually not a productive thing. There's a lot of guys who reclassify up struggle to make the impact as a freshman that they were initially projected to do. And that becomes more and more prevalent as you become more and more of a guard. The guards who reclassify up and skip a year, Elliot Cadeau being the most recent example at North Carolina, that just, there's that missed year hurts. It's one of the reasons why I expect Elliot to be much better this year at North Carolina. But so for Will in particular, I think that we have to be aware of that trend, because there's very clear data to suggest that the late reclassification is a challenge. And the variable for him in particular is the weight room. And so, it's going to, and I don't know the specifics of this, like, does he get there in time for summer session to have the benefit of working with the training staff? Because if you need Will Riley to make an impact next year, the work, it needs to start like right now in the weight room. What he's doing in EYBL is I don't want to say it's irrelevant because it's building his confidence and expanding his game. But the much more important work is getting him physically ready for what's in store at the next level. And I do think that could be a little bit more of a process.
His ceiling, though, I mean, you have him as top 10. What excites you about his long-term potential?
The overlap of size and scoring. I mean, he's just got a knack for putting the ball in the basket and do it in versatile ways. And as I said, I still think there's parts of his game that could smooth out. I think his release point can fluctuate a little bit. I think there's, sometimes he can be a little herky jerky off the dribble, but this kid just has a knack for putting the ball in the basket. And like I said, with Fears having just similar, like a ton of instinctive game, like you've just got a couple ballers here. And I don't mean to like simplify it like that, because there are plenty of times where we can get in the weeds and it can become nuance based and we can really go deep with the analysis. And there are other times when you say like, hey, you put this kid on the court, no matter what setting he's in, he's just scoring at will, like dropping 40 points per game in high prep school leagues, like being one of the leading scorers in the EYBL. Like this kid knows how to score, not just from a skill perspective, but just has an instinct for doing it. I mean, there's a difference between being able to simulate certain drills and practices or workouts and then just instinctively knowing how to navigate your path into getting your own shot, not because anyone taught you, just because it comes to you in that instinctive kind of way. And I think he's got that quality about him. So he's someone that certainly there's reason to be excited about. But at the same time, like, just recognize this is a year earlier than anticipated. And so you got to let him kind of grow into his body and smooth out. But the upside is significant.
Adam, one more on Will before we move on here. I know that one thing that the Illini staff really likes is his feel. I feel like he has a high feel for the game. He is a playmaking wing, at least he's been to this point. With You Play Canada, I know it's a different environment versus what he would do in college, but brings the ball up a lot, initiates a lot of offense. Do you see that in his future at 6'8", being a guy that can create some on the ball, or just maybe even within the flow of an offense, be able to see a read here and make some passes? Because I know that's something that he has shown as well, in addition to just high volume of scoring.
Yeah, I'd be leery with like that playmaker label. Not that you said it, but I think lots of times in high school, when you're the best player on the court, you bring the ball up and you get called a point guard. Like we're talking a lot about that with like Steph Castle right now. He was the 3 at UConn, darn good at it too. And then people are saying, well, hold on, in AAU, or when he played in the Under Armour Association, he played the point. So was he a point guard in the NBA? So that's a dialogue we're having now. I think Will is a scoring wing who can bring some secondary playmaking. So if that means that now at Illinois, as you guys know better than I do, they've shown a willingness to play without a conventional point guard and to do it pretty darn well. So does he fit into that system? Yeah, I think he does. I don't think I foresee an outcome where you talk about him as a big lead guard or anything like that. But I think he's someone that can take on ball handling responsibilities, take on playmaking responsibilities, ideally not as your primary facilitator, but as someone who, if he gets it in the open floor, he can play pick and roll, or if he can play pick and roll, ideally in the second side of the floor. Now you've got somebody you can really weaponize. And to me, that's what like modern basketball is all about, is having multiple playmakers surrounded by multiple floor spacers. And now you've got all the ingredients of a good offense.
Will may be on his way to the 2024 class. The Illini already have a stud big man in that class, Morez Johnson, who really came on fantastically down the stretch of his AAU career. Peach Jam was maybe the best big man there on the 17U circuit, as productive as any, at least, with the double-doubles he had, double-doubles with Team USA here recently prior to arriving on campus down at the FIBA AmeriCup. So what have you liked about his progression? What do you think about his first year impact at Illinois?
So, I think I remember like message boards fans getting angry at me about this, but I just think he's a 5. He's a 5. He's a big, strong, physical guy who plays inside, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's what makes him good. If he was trying to be a 4, we would have ranked him a lot lower in the class because he'd have been a whole lot less efficient. So he, to me, is a 5-man who's physically ready for college basketball, who can come in and defend and post and understand his role. Like, he knows how to duck in. He knows how to guard pick and rolls. He knows who he is. So, and I think some of that, like, that's what makes him valuable. is that he knows he's a 5 and he embraces that. He embraces that blue collar mentality. He embraces going to the glass, embraces being a physical guy. So I think that's what I would be most excited about, because especially in college basketball, like there's huge value in that. And he has an understanding and ability to play that role at a level that I think immediately translates. I don't know that I foresee him being like a focal point offensively. Certainly not in the short term. Maybe he grows into that long term. I don't want to say that's out of the realm of possible outcomes, but someone who can come in is physically strong enough and has an understanding of what it takes to be a 5-man, and then still has like some untapped room on his frame. Like he's naturally strong, but you put him in a college weight room, I think his body could just really explode.
And I love that he knows what he is.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be very valuable for a freshman trying to get a big role. I wanted to ask you, we got a couple more for you before we let you go, Adam. What stands out to you about this Illinois basketball overhaul? Great season. We lose Terrence Shannon, Marcus Damas, Coleman Hawkins, yet you bring in 10 newcomers here, which we know can be a high variance thing for the next season. But there's a lot of talent, a lot of skill here. What stands out to you? Any additions, or what do you think of this Illinois basketball offseason?
I love the quote. Oh, you guys would know it better than me, but what was it like after that Elite 8 loss? Like I have no idea who the person was who asked the question. But basically saying, like, insinuating that Illinois was going to take a dip in Brad Underwood. And I'm paraphrasing, but he was more or less like, hey, do you know who I am? Like that was like, it was awesome. It was totally gangster. And I was kind of like, yeah, I mean, come on, the guy can coach. And I think he's shown that at previous points. So like talent acquisition and roster construction is one thing, but maximizing that talent is another thing. And I think like you go back to last year and there were a lot of questions about, myself included, like I didn't think they were going to be as good as they were because, and quite frankly, I don't think most coaches would have gotten what they did out of that roster. Shannon becoming what he was huge, but this was a team and I thought it was fair, like didn't have a true point guard, and they became like not only figured it out, but became elite on the offensive end of the floor. So I think that's the part that we don't necessarily talk enough about, like getting players and roster construction. Like that's huge. That's always been like, the lifeblood of a college basketball program. But at some point, the guy who's figuring out how to maximize the pieces he has, that becomes a really important part of it too. And this guy, like to his point, he's going to get it done.
I'm interested as you as an evaluator with the Europeans now coming in to the college game a little bit more. What is the challenge of evaluating a Kasparis Yakashonis or a Tomislav Ivicic when we're trying to figure out what they could be or how they figure into our rankings and all that kind of stuff? I would imagine that's a little bit more difficult.
It's I mean, I don't want to, I've never seen those guys play in person. And when you, and like, I take this stuff like very seriously, you know what I mean? And we take a lot of pride in making sure our rankings, like, because you're projecting a futures market, you're never going to get 100% right. You're always going to make mistakes, but I take a lot of pride in making less mistakes than everybody else and making sure our rankings are the standard, which I believe they are widely considered to be in the industry. When you have to try and guess on guys, that becomes a challenge. So I think what you'll see in the future is us try and account for some of these international guys that are coming in and account for their reputations, but also account for the fact that we don't have the same level of understanding about them. So I'd be lying to you if I said I knew what to expect from that guy. I haven't seen him in person. I know what his reputation is. But like, I haven't evaluated him with my own two eyes. So the truth of the matter is I don't know. His reputation is impressive, but a lot of people say a lot of things, especially in international basketball. And I also don't know who is incentivized to say certain things. So I'm just going to reserve judgment as far as the rankings and the rating systems go, which I know is what fans are all about. But one of the reasons why we are waiting right now to insert a lot of these guys is, quite frankly, we made a lot of mistakes last year look at that UCLA class. Like, we had to guess on those guys because that has been the tradition here at 24/7 is to rank international players. But I think that tradition was born at a time when we were the hunter from an evaluator's perspective. And now, like I said, I really do believe we set the industry standard. And so we've got to make sure that we can evaluate international prospects in a way that is consistent with the same high level of quality we do all the way around. And until we can do that, this is a broader conversation, but I am of the opinion, like, if we can't do it well, let's not do it at all. Like, let's not guess. So I would like to get to a place where, like, we are accounting for their reputation, we're accounting for their potential, but also acknowledging that we can't say that we know them just as well as we know somebody like Will Riley or Fears or something like that, because we just haven't seen them and evaluated them ourselves. So I think that's kind of the fluid place we're in right now. And I think I hope that you'll see an evolution in the way that we rate those international players.
Adam, obviously we've seen a lot of Terrence Shannon Jr., who will hear his name called in the NBA draft coming up here next week. I'm curious in your thoughts, as we've seen some more mock drafts come out, some updates to him that seems to be trending back into that first round range where he was prior to the suspension. Are you hearing some of the similar things? And what do you think about the way that teams view him? I know he's an older prospect. Maybe you think about maybe a contender who needs someone to come in right away, higher floor type. What do you think of Terrence as he pushes forward towards the NBA?
I think it's a loaded question because obviously he was acquitted of those charges. But the reality is, for NBA teams and the amount of due diligence they do, that's still a relevant thing. Like these guys, the front offices that are good at their jobs, they get so detail oriented with the background checks that it's more about the impact that a player is going to have in the locker room, on the off the court, on the other players on the team. And it wouldn't be appropriate for me to speak on that for anybody. I think that's one of the challenges of covering the draft, is there are certain things that are very relevant to an NBA front office that aren't appropriate for us to talk about from a media perspective. Like, we can't, if someone, and this, let me be clear, I'm not talking specifically about Terrence Shannon right now, but if I know somebody is dropping in the draft, and this has happened, it happened last year. Like, if someone is falling in the draft because all of the intel is really concerning, I can't go on TV and say that. You know what I mean? Like, well, nobody wants this kid because he's got a horrible reputation. People are really concerned about the person around him. There's real serious concerns about, like, how good of a, like, you hear the word processing, what kind of processor he is. That means, like, can he remember all of our plays? Can he read the game? Like, we can't. So there's a lot of stuff that we can't talk about when we cover the draft. The way this relates to TJ Shannon is that I think NBA teams, each one is still doing their due diligence on, everything. They're doing it on everybody. But with him, it's obviously, there's more to it. And that's still a big part of the process for every team involved. And they're all going to go through their own process. They're all going to make, heck, you guys might have even gotten calls. Like, the amount of research that is done off the floor about anyone that a team is thinking about drafting, because we're talking about a multi-million-dollar investment, is more significant than the general public could possibly imagine. And that's not for every team, but that's for the good teams. They give these guys personality assessments. I mean, it's crazy, the level of depth that goes in here. Now, from a sheer basketball perspective, I still think there are some questions, because as great as he was this year, this is someone who's been on draft boards and expected to go to the league like year in and year out for a long time, and just, ends up going back to college. Like, does the jumper translate? Does the jumper translate when he's not the primary domino in the offense? Because I don't expect he will be at the next level. So I do think he will trend back up now that the court case has been resolved. But I think there are plenty of questions still to answer, both in the NBA's different teams collecting and doing their due diligence off the floor, as well as how he may fit, schematically on the court.
Adam Finkelstein, Director of Scouting, 24/7 Sports. Appreciate the insight on all of this, man. We look forward to your draft coverage. We'll see where Terrence Shannon goes next week. Appreciate the insight, man.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, good stuff from Adam there. Yeah, we're starting to see, Derek, Terrence Shannon kind of trend back into these drafts, including some big names like Jonathan Vigoni and Jeremy Wu of ESPN having 27 overall to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Kristen Peak, who works for Yahoo Sports, has him at 24 overall to the New York Knicks. Kevin O'Connor from The Ringer has him 30 overall to the champion Boston Celtics. If this is not like, if this is all that they needed, if they've done their background, feel comfortable with it, if it's about basketball, this makes sense, Derek, because Terrence Shannon in this draft should be a first round draft pick based. I know he's going to be 24 when the season starts, but he can help a contender. So what do you make of all of this in the aftermath of the not guilty verdict?
No, I thought it was very interesting. Adam's description there. And I imagine that is the case of trying to continue to dig into intel and background. I think that outside of this case, and I don't know how much more NBA teams will have access to try to get any buzz on that. I would imagine all the intel on Terrence coming from the Illinois camp, from his upbringing, is going to be very positive in terms of his work ethic. They're going to love that. Just seems like a guy that's about basketball, and teammates feel like he's high character and everything as far as that goes. And then from the basketball standpoint, yeah, I mean, we've said it a number of times, he was an NBA player playing in college last year. I think it was obvious that he could have been picked early to mid second round, but chose the guaranteed money back in college via NIL. I think that that's something that NBA teams got to consider, where you're going to have more and more of these cases where guys are maybe a little bit older who were in that second round range to then go back to college and take advantage of what is just a crazy NIL market. So I think he comes in right away. He's got a ready-made body. He's a top-level athlete, which even plays at the NBA level. For him to be at the combine, not this year, but last year, and have the top three-quarter court sprint, to have great lateral agility. We know he's got a 38-inch vertical. He's physically strong. Like that all plays. The open court nature in the NBA, the floor spacing, the transition game really just plays right into who he can be. So no, Adam said it right. He's not going to be a primary scorer when he comes into the league, but he's someone that can attack the rim, be someone that is streaking down the floor for those things. I think he can build on what he did defensively last year. And the three ball, I know it's a 1 year sample size. We kind of saw it with Io as well. And Io's really taken that his last season at Illinois and then elevated. I mean, he shot close to around, 40% from three this past year at the Bulls. So there is that possibility that Terrence can do something similar. So I think he belongs in the first round as long as everything else checks out. And obviously we're seeing that trend. And I've even heard here recently from Illinois people, as they talk to scouts and things, they're fully expecting him to go in the first round as things stand today.
It's big for the program. We keep bringing it up. It's been 12 years since Myers Leonard, and they need some NBA first round draft picks. And that's why Will Riley can be exciting, because he's got that potential. Kasparis Kashonis has that kind of potential, but I'm kind of looking at the end of the first round here about where he could go. Cause 24 years old, right? That's going to be part of why a lottery team doesn't take him. They're trying to take lottery tickets for guys that can be stars here. So even for a team like the Bulls, where I think Terrence Shannon could fit in good, like they need to take somebody that could potentially be a superstar in the NBA. And there's more risk there, but there's more upside. But I do think a team like New York, like you could see him playing alongside Jalen Brunson. You think of a team like Minnesota or Denver, Boston, like those are teams he can help right away, make a kind of playoff push. Phoenix needs a point guard, so I don't know if they would take him at 22, but there's another team that I feel like he could really help. So I think he'd be a real value at the end of the first round. But after this, Derek, like I think he helped himself probably by going on the stand and doing as well, I think, and comporting himself as well throughout this entire process. We have talked about how amazing it was, of how well he played despite this hanging over him. Like how he's gone through this process, I think has been something that helped him with the questions lingering over him. These next 2 weeks, though, these weeks leading into this, I think are really important because maybe he can actually talk about it more with these NBA teams and address some of the questions that they have. So this will be important, but I think you and I agree. He's an NBA player. And I think it's a positive for me that I think he's no doubt going to be drafted in the top 40, top 45 and get guaranteed money in the NBA. Because that is what he has been the last 2 years at Illinois, is a guaranteed NBA contract guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you as far as the stand and just who he's been. I think he's shown extreme composure and consistency, obviously, in terms of his side of the story. And if you just look at him playing under pressure last year with so much of the spotlight on him, with so much animosity that he faced on the road, I know you wouldn't forecast that he would be someone that a lot of NBA fans would immediately know or would focus on, but it does speak to his ability to perform in pressure moments and be able to just handle adversity and those type of things. So I would imagine that's positive. I think that surely he will have to answer questions behind the scenes with some of these teams about still probably the situation, or just answer some hard questions as far as that goes. But I think that he did help himself both in the trial. I mean, I know the evidence ultimately wasn't there, but I think him taking the stand kind of humanized him, obviously, to the jury, and it really showed to them that this is a person that we're dealing with as far as their livelihood goes. So I thought he did well with that, and I think that the basketball side of it, a lot of and not like I'm not an NBA GM for a reason, so I'm not going to sit here and say what I would do or what that I know better than others, but a lot of these kind of high upside picks, their upside may not touch what Terrence is right now. Like that when you're talking about 19-year-old guys who are freshmen, Terrence has a lot of what you would want in a player. I know that he's not. He's still kind of, as you look at it, got some questions with the shooting. I understand that. Has done more in terms of on the ball. I think as an off the ball catch and shoot guy. I mean, that's who he was at Texas Tech. I think that he would be good in that role, downhill slasher, those type of things. So I think that as far as what he can be, the known commodities in his game, and then maybe as he buys into more of a supplemental role and really locks in defensively, doesn't expend as much energy as this possession after possession on offense, could really become an impactful defender, because that might be what earns his way onto the court.
Yeah, like I see Cam Christie above him. I love Cam Christie. Like I think he could be a dead-eye shooter in the NBA, and there's a ton of value in having that. But if you're talking about like one of these teams we're talking about, like at the end of the first round, who's going to help you in the next 2 years make that playoff push? I think it's Terrence Shannon. So that'll be interesting to watch. We are on Will Riley watch. The announcement is coming on Sunday afternoon. Derek and we got some crystal balls coming in for Illinois. It looks like they are the leader. Adam and Travis Branham were on 24/7 Sports YouTube show the other day talking about how Illinois is the leader here and they got the momentum coming in. So just what do you think about the maybe days away from reality of Illinois adding the prospect of Will Riley's caliber, who's number top 10 in the class of 2025, whether that's top 30 or top 20 in the class of 2024, regardless, is the guy with NBA potential?
It'd be a heck of an end to this offseason cycle. We talked about it before, but Gaspar Shakachonis, the way that he's viewed, I mean, I know that Sam Vecini's gone on the Athletics podcast, I believe, and just talked about how much the NBA really likes him and how much Sam personally is very high on what he can be at Illinois and in college, and then beyond that as an NBA draft pick. So that to win that, and then to be able to, as it looks right now, to reel in Will Riley, who had a number of high-level suitors. It would have been a different chase if it would have been sticking in 25. I know he hasn't made an announcement as far as that goes, but the full expectation is that he will be going to 2024 and reclassifying. So with Alabama being full, I'm not saying that Illinois couldn't win that sweepstakes if he was going to be in 25, but man, what a talent. What a inroad by Orlando Antigua at Kentucky, then to pivot it over to Illinois. It shows the value of having an ace recruiter. I know that there's more to it. It still definitely matters, getting you in those doors, having been around pros, because that always matters for guys that are in that realm and are viewed as future draft picks, especially on the high end. They want to know that the coaching staff has worked with those type of guys. So Antigua's got a long resume of being around NBA level guys. Of course, you got to have the NIL to get it done. You got to have an offense. I think an offense last year that's third in the country in offensive efficiency. seeing some bigger playmakers or bigger guys with the ball in their hand and being able to do a lot of things like Shannon, like Damask. I think that all helps. And then Illinois' roster, while it has a lot of talent, there's still so much to play out in terms of roles. And so there's opportunity to be had, even though, yes, he would be in competition with Trey White, Ty Rodgers, Yakachonis. And I know we were talking before this podcast, and we've talked about it before, how you'd love to just see it work itself out. And it's a great problem to have and those type of things. So I'll be very curious where he would land in 24. I personally think he'd still deserve to be a 5-star. And if he is, he'd probably be the highest ranked recruit, at least consensusly, since D. Brown for Illinois, I would imagine. So very, very exciting. Illinois loves him as a player, loves his upside. And hey, if he needs an extra year of physical development and he's around at Illinois for 2 years, look out.
Well, here's the thing, like, Io and Kofi and even guys like Adam Miller, Sky Clark, Andre Corbello, these weren't huge prep editions. Think of what they've got in these two classes, like Morez Johnson, highest ranked guy since D. Brown, according to the composite. Jeremiah Fears is top 5 when it comes to the composite since D. Brown. And then, Will Riley could take that number 1 spot. That they are still recruiting at a high level in the prep realm, in addition to the European stuff, in addition to the transfer. So listen, I get it. I got questions about how's this all going to work out? Like, who's going to play? I'm excited about those questions. I'm not fretting about those questions because sure, there's a downside of somebody being upset about playing. Somebody will be upset about playing time. But I am more encouraged after how Brad handled that last year with guys like Dane Danger, Luke Goody, or even Dre Gibbs-Walhorn, I'm sure in the middle of the year, we know probably wasn't very happy about his playing time. But those guys came out on the other end of it, and they come to Illinois now knowing that you have to compete for playing time. You have to be good to play. It's not just handed to you anymore. So, and I also love that there's just some flexibility. Like Will Riley can probably play 2 through 4. Like Trey White could play the 3 and the 4. Ty Rodgers could play 1 through 4, right? Like, so all those guys, like, I don't think it's static minutes. Like Will Riley could steal some minutes from Kasparis, or Ty Rodgers or Trey White, or Trey White could steal minutes from some other guy, Ben Humrickhouse, if Humrickhouse struggles, but I don't think that's going to be an issue. I just love that there's this kind of competition. And I just kind of trust Brad Underwood at this point to kind of figure it out and to have a read on these players. They did that really well last year. Obviously 2 years ago, it didn't go as well, but they were just trying to get talent and reload after losing all that they lost. So it'll be interesting to watch how it all plays out, Derek, but I'm excited about it because the floor with all the talent you are accruing is this is an NCAA tournament team. The ceiling of what it could be, not just next year, not just 2 seasons from now, but this season, at the end of the season, man, it's exciting because I don't think they've had this level of talent in this Illinois program in a long time. Now it's young. It's got to sort itself out. It's got to play together. It's got to grow together. But just the raw talent that is going to be on this roster next year it's ridiculous.
Yeah, the depth of the talent too. And you're talking about, Kasparis Yakachonis being an NBA level prospect, and obviously Will Riley, if you add him into the fold, Morez has that future potentially in store for him as well. So that pro side of it, in addition to some very talented and productive college players, Humrickhouse being one of those. Trey White started 55 games at the high major level. We're still excited about Ty Rodgers. Especially now that he's a knockdown 3-point shooter.
We'll talk about that.
But I'm joking, of course. But yeah, I think that the thing that fans probably need to realize is there's been a handful of programs that have been doing this for a long time, bringing in a ton of talent and then having it work itself out. And yes, you do have to. And Brad's even said it. Brad's on record of saying you can have too many guys who. The fill in the blank part of that is guys who are capable enough to play minutes and that want minutes. And ultimately you can't feed 10, 11 mouths as far as the minutes go, the shots go. And that's where it gets important in evaluating personalities and cohesion and those type of things. So there is a little bit of that contrast of he said that line, but then they went out and are trying to add another piece in Riley. So, but yeah, back to what I was saying, Kentucky's done this for a long time. Kansas has done this for a long time. Even more close to Illinois, Michigan State for a long time, you could be a top 50 recruit and come in and not play as a freshman just because they had so many dudes. So that's certainly been able to play itself out. And even last year, like you mentioned, Dane Danger's a good player. He's went and got a boatload of money in NIL from Memphis. He was a former, at one time, top 50, top 100 prospect out of high school. Like he could have been a starting center and put up good numbers somewhere else. Didn't play all that much. Justin Harmon didn't have a huge role. A guy that was a fifth year and on down the line, Goody, DGL. So I know that those guys handled it well last year, where maybe not even maybe the year before, when Sky Clark lost his starting spot, and not long after that, he was packing up his room and going to California, and he was out. So there are different levels, and it's hard to predict really on the front end a lot of times how certain guys will ultimately handle certain adversities. But I think it's great for Brad to be able to play it out, and maybe it just means more not as many guys playing 30-plus minutes. You're going to just be able to manipulate it, and you can based on matchup, based on who's hot, who's playing well, how practice is going, hold people accountable. That's always a great thing when you have depth to do. But maybe more guys in that 20 to 25 range on the minute scale versus maybe 4 guys to 30-plus.
Yeah, because Boswell, Humrickhouse, those would be the only guys I would project that could be over that. And maybe Humrickhouse isn't. Like maybe Kerry Booth plays a little bit more than we expect, or maybe Trey White takes more minutes at the 4. But like none of those guys, like that's a team that I don't know has any proven stars. And we'll see if Boswell, Humrickhouse, or anybody else can be that. But that could be a strength for a program that's really relied on All-Americans the last couple of years. Not that they have a little bit of depth, but this is definitely the deepest in talent. So it'll be just interesting to see how Brad Underwood approaches that. But I do think Adam hit on it with the concerns about a reclass with Will Riley, but I don't think he's coming here to score 6 points a game, Derek. I don't think that's going to be the case either. And I don't think Illinois is bringing him in, and I would assume getting a nice NIL package to just sit that guy on the bench and not try to make him a one and done first round draft pick.
No, absolutely. He's coming to play. Illinois expects him to play. They're going to have to work out the exact roles and the combinations. As you mentioned there, maybe it is, I think, starting wise in the backcourt, probably Kylan and Kasparas Yakachonis, but it's possible if Trey White is too hard to pull off the floor, if Ty Rodgers is too hard to pull off the floor, you play maybe one of those lead guard options and then roll with a bigger lineup. But as far as Riley goes, yes, he's, as Adam broke down, just a very gifted shot maker. He's going to have bigger defenders trying to get into him, knock him off his spot. We've seen this. It's a tale as old as time when you got and look, he's not going to be the first freshman 18-year-old come in who needs to get stronger. That happens all the time. I brought this up to Isaac Trotter last week, and why can't he be Cam Christie this upcoming year in the Big Ten? Cam Christie came in as a prospect. He was listed at 160 pounds. And ultimately last year at Minnesota, I know he got up to 190. But if we said, can Fletch add 10 pounds between next week and the start of the season, I think that's very reasonable and an easy bar for him to hit. And just I think the volume wouldn't probably be the same because Cam Christie on that Minnesota team needed to be more of a focal point. But someone who just his primary skill was to shoot it, to get buckets, to be able to hit pull-ups, to be able to hit catch and shoot threes. I don't know why Will, with his slender frame but a talented bucket getter, couldn't do what Cam did last year. I know a lot of people have maybe pointed out some of the players that disappointed relative to expectation. You look at, Xavier Booker didn't even barely play at Michigan State. You got some other guys that, contrary to, their rankings, didn't come in and just kill it. But Cam's one of those that had a really, really good year, obviously put on a show at State Farm Center. And I'm not saying that it's a perfect comp, but it does make me think of maybe a guy that still they're talking about with Cam as the NBA goes, needs to get stronger, needs to develop his body, but man, he can score it and shoot it. I think Will could potentially have that attached to him in a similar way.
Yeah, I think he's like kind of a role player on this team, but like a potential guy who can lead you in scoring in that role in a certain game, right? Like I think Boswell and Humrickhouse are kind of the go-to players. I think Trey White could put himself into that conversation. I'm really interested to see what Kasparis and Tomislav bring to this team when they get here and they start competing. But I just think Trey White I feel like Will Riley on this team could be a double-digit scorer at his best. And as worse, he's just another talented piece that you can add. So I don't think any of us are expecting Brandon Miller or Kevin Durant or anything like this out of an 18-year-old, but I do expect him to make an impact. And I expect him to go through some growing pains, but I'm excited to watch that process. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, assuming nothing changes and that Will Riley does end up in Illini on Sunday. I also want to bring up workouts are underway. We've seen some videos, and well done by the Illinois team getting Ty Rodgers jump shot knocked down. I think it was a 3-pointer in their highlight video. It sent Illini Twitter into a tizzy. I got a hot take on that, Derek.
Let's hear it.
I don't care. I don't care about Ty Rodgers' videos shooting 3-pointers. I think that's obviously his next step, and I expect him to get better at it. But for this team, Ty Rodgers does not need to shoot 3-pointers unless he's on the court with Morez Johnson. Okay. Like if he and Morez Johnson, so like next year when those two are really, really key players, yes, I think that is going to be important for him just to be a threat to shoot a jumper. So I'm excited to see Ty Rodgers attempt some jumpers against Ken Pom 320 team that they play in the non-conference schedule. But when they play Alabama or if they play Arkansas, I really don't need him shooting those. I'd rather Will Riley or Kylan Boswell or Trey White or Ben Humrickhouse or Tomislav Ivicic. I'd rather those guys shoot those 3-pointers. I want Ty Rodgers to make layups and free throws, play defense and rebound. If he does those at a high level, he's going to play a lot of minutes.
I think it's a good take. I do agree with that. It obviously would just the ability to take that shot and be a semi-threat, be capable of making one, even at like a 30% clip or whatever it is, not super efficient, but that would change his game and would change who has to guard him, or at least the way that teams have to think about guarding him. So that could further open up the floor for Illinois, put defenses in a bind. I know there's not going to be Zach Edey in this league to match up with him, to dork him, but Indiana could throw Omar Ballo on him. You could have Michigan with Vlad Golden. So and on down the line, some other bigs that, yes, Ty at times attacking the Matty Sissoko, although I would argue very much in the low end of the starting big men, if not the very worst in the Big Ten last year. That could change some things if he can make maybe not even a 15-foot jump shot on occasion. So do think that big picture, much more important is the finishing at the rim. Much more important is getting to the free throw line a little bit more, maybe just having more confidence and aggression to him offensively if he can, again, finish at the rim around there and those type of things. But I think it's good. I will say, if my memory serves me correctly, I think it's surpassed the Omar Payne mid-range jumper already because I never saw that on tape. I heard about it. I heard that he was making mid-range 12 to 15-foot jump shots in summer workouts. Never saw it with my own two eyes. I've actually seen Ty Rodgers on tape make a three. Yes, there's an unguarded shooting drill. I have heard he's made a couple in 5-on-5s, but that's past Omar.
Okay, so the guy I've kind of compared his role to, because we got to remember in college, this guy did not start off like he was going to be an NBA Hall of Famer. Draymond Green, his first 2 years at Michigan State, shot 3 for 17 from the three-point line. His junior year comes back, shoots 37 of 101, 37%. Next year, 52 of 134. That's 39%. That made him an NBA draft pick, right? I'm not expecting the 2 for 16 to 37 for 101 for Tyrod. Like I am not expecting that. If I said over under 8.5 made 3-pointers for Ty Rodgers next year, what are you taking?
I'd probably take the under, I guess. I still gotta see it. I got to see it in game action, game shots, and there is going to be a conversation to be had where even if he can make it, maybe even if you're open and if you're going to shoot 25% from three, don't take that shot for the most part. So I don't know. There maybe is enough Ken Pom 300 games baked in there to where he could hit that and maybe even only have to make like 2 in Big Ten play.
I will be rooting for him to get him up during those games. I will be rooting because if you get some, you make some, you get some confidence. All of a sudden, you never know. Like DeMonte Williams was not a shooter, right? Until his huge year. So the confidence would be huge for him. But if he hasn't made one leading into those huge games like Alabama, no, that's just not your game. And he doesn't need to do that to be really important for this team is my entire point. Because the team that's surrounding him, Derek, I think is great for him. Like, unless it's him and Morez on the court, like, I just think if he's got Ivicic and Hummerkaus and all these shooters around him, I just don't think that needs to be his role.
For sure. And similar to the KenPom 300, now is especially the time to play with that, see opportunities where you can take it in 5-on-5s and summer workouts. No, don't trend away from who you are as a player, take away from some aggressive drives at the rim and those type of things, and booty ball. Cause I think that's another thing that he could probably try to build on. Cause you've heard, when I've talked to Tyler Underwood and talked to some other people and it's been on record, like when Illinois was thinking about adding booty ball to their offense last year, their identity, a lot of what they were working on was with Ty at that. So maybe some more experience in that this year can be something that he can add. So yeah, don't like what Adam said with Morez. Morez knows who he is. You don't want to, and they've already admittedly thrown a lot at Ty here in his first 2 years, now going into his third. Like, okay, you're a Swiss Army knife 3-4. We might even play at the 5. Oh wait, no, you're our point guard. No, now you're not. Those type of things. So don't put too much on his plate. But they've worked a lot just on trying to, number one, get him confident. Number two, shot mechanics, even if that's only going to help him maybe more at the free throw line.
Yep.
But yes, the three ball is something that they're playing around with right now. And if you can make a few and even just put a few on tape in the KenPom 300 games. So it's something that comes up on the scouting report when you're playing Bama, you're playing Arkansas, you're playing Duke, you're playing the Big Ten. Those are good things for Illinois just to make people think about it.
Yeah, for me, it's like there's more parts of his offensive game that I think he can perfect before he tries to add this other thing that's just not natural to him. And it wasn't in high school. Like, he was a more confident shooter in high school. He wasn't a shooter. He attacked the rim. He created for his teammates, finished at the rim, and make free throws. Like, make free throws, make more layups at a higher percentage. We saw when Terrence was out, he can be an offensive weapon. Like, he can create, he can get to the rim, he can score some points. So that's my next step for him. Workouts are underway. Derek, you had a great update on the board. Give me one thing for the podcast that you thought stood out the most of what you've heard from workouts so far with everybody that is on campus.
I think Trey White, what I heard about him so far, did have somebody tell me to give you a little taste of what we have on the board, that he's been the best player on the court to this point. Now we're only a week and a half into summer workouts, and certainly it's not the full collection of players on the court quite yet, because Parashaka Chonas getting in this week. Thomas Lavicic at some point here in the next few weeks is kind of the expected and ideal range for Illinois as far as that goes. And then Will Riley, after his announcement, if he does pick Illinois, would then be en route. But to hear that Trey has looked like that guy is something that I think we mentioned him as maybe somebody that hasn't gotten the love, at least the pub at times, sometimes an afterthought. I wouldn't say that people completely forget about him, but he is, again, a 21-year-old former highly thought of prospect who was an all freshman at USC, 55 starts, high major between USC and Louisville, and somebody that can do a number of different things. He's a good athlete. He's got the ability to play in the mid post, which is an area, thinking about some booty ball that he can really tap into. Shot selection, I think, can help his efficiency, as we've talked about throughout the offseason. And then defensively he's a good rebounder too. That should definitely be noted. And then defensively, he has the physical skills and what he should need to be a good, adequate defender. Just needs to have the commitment there. So I like the fact that he's come in, that he's really been kind of an under the radar addition for the most part. Like, we didn't know about him. There was nothing really publicized about him prior to him committing to Illinois. Since committing to Illinois, hasn't said a word. So it's just been really low key with Trey White. And but it does sound like he's making his presence felt over that oven. And I think that's notable. I know somebody's going to sit there and say, even more of a reason not to add Will Riley, because you're going to mess up the locker room. But it's good that Trey's playing well.
Yeah, no, like that's a good thing. But yeah, like it reminds me not that he's going to have the year Marcus Damask had, but Damask happened so quick, right? And it was like that happened. Then you're like, what's next? What's next? That kind of got pushed to the side. Like we knew Damask would be a big part of this team, and I think you and I have talked about Trey White's going to be one of the more important players on this team. But like we talked about Damask, the return on investment could be as good as any. It feels like with this one, Trey White, the return on investment could be great because like there weren't a ton of other suitors that we heard about. It happened so quick. It didn't seem like this got like any kind of bidding war. Not that he won't make any NIL or anything like that, but it feels like this was an important first addition for Illinois in the transfer portal, and that he could be a big impact. Like I would expect this guy that averaged double digits last year on a bad Louisville team with bad coaching. He's got a good team. He's going to have good coaching this year, and I think they're going to try and unlock some things through the way that they play. So I'm excited about him. Like him, Boswell, Humrickhouse, that feels like your floor guys. They're going to make you competitive in the Big Ten. Then all these younger, more unknown pieces are kind of the guys who lift the ceiling. So I think that's good to hear about Trey White early on, because he should be one of the best players early on in this team, because he's one of the experienced guys. He's one of the older guys, and he's one of the more proven guys.
For sure. Absolutely. And I do like that. I know we talked a lot last year about bringing in some mid-major guys like a Damask and then also Justin Harmon, who might be motivated to prove themselves. I think when you get Kylan Boswell and Trey White, players that you could nitpick last year, didn't have the ideal seasons ultimately that they wanted. Trey, I know that you're talking team success, you're talking efficiency, defensively, Kylan consistency, and be able to build off of where he was as a prospect and those type of things. Those guys should be very hungry, who in their minds and reasonably so are thinking as they came into college that they would be NBA draft prospects and probably early entrants into that realm based on where they were both ranked and as they were thought of coming up. But those guys should be very much hungry to have the seasons that they're capable of, and to be able to, even though they're both very familiar, and I'm would be glad that they are, if I'm Illinois and I'm the fan base, that they're very familiar with the high major level and this level of competition, but there's still plenty more that they can show, and whether it's, again, consistency over a full season, different dynamics of their game. And Kylan's been fairly, although we haven't got a chance to talk to him yet, well documented, the way he's worked on his body, his work ethic, the way he's approached it. Brad said some things like he's just very laser focused. It feels like Trey, again, kind of a little bit under the radar, might be in that mode as well.
Yeah, it's a good point, because those guys' careers, well, good. They've probably not gone as well as they had hoped. So they're coming to Illinois for business, right? Like they're coming to not resuscitate, but like really catapult their careers. So that'll be interesting to watch, because I think those guys are pretty businesslike, and Humrickhouse doing the same thing with the opportunity he probably never thought he'd have, playing at the Big Ten level after starting at the Division II level. Those guys you'd think would propel them forward. All right, Derek, one last thing that we haven't weighed in on yet. Phoenix Gill to Northwestern. I think it's a great fit. Illinois obviously is recruiting at another level at this point, but Chris Collins and Phoenix, I think is going to be a longtime college player here that can make an impact, local kid. Makes sense. But of course, when Kendall Gill, that's a legacy guy here. Illinois fans would be like, oh, I hope that one doesn't come back and hurt us. And there'll probably be some games Phoenix Gill plays well against Illinois at some point.
I'm sure there will. I'm sure he'd be very, very highly motivated, especially coming back to the State Farm Center and seeing his dad's jersey hanging up there. And admittedly, I understand if there's some disappointment out there of what could have been. That would have been a super cool dynamic to have the son of a flying Illini legend playing for the Illini. Ultimately, I understand and agree with Illinois' stance of pulling back the reins and understanding that they are recruiting at a super high level, that Phoenix did have some more to show, and a guy that didn't play AAU last year and this year has played on the EYBL circuit with mixed results. And even his junior year at St. Ignatius wasn't what he ultimately would have hoped for in terms of taking another step forward with his game. So I do like him, though. I like him as a player and who he can be, because he is a decent to good athlete for sure. I'd say good athlete, no doubt. A little undersized if you're talking about like an off guard. Has played with the ball in his hands, though, so we'll see how that development goes. But his dad was late developing. That's been well documented as far as his physical and just overall player development. And later in his high school career, had a growth spurt, really came on and became a legend. I'm not saying that Phoenix is going to be that, but I think it's a really good fit. Like you said, get to stay home in the Chicagoland area. His mom went to Northwestern, so you got that kind of legacy dynamic there as well. He's in the Big Ten, and that's one of those that Chris Collins has done well with of getting those, maybe a 3-4 star type of guy. And I'm happy for Phoenix. I look forward to what he's going to become. I think he can be a good player. Maybe just will take a little bit of time, or more so Illinois maybe is trying to have that flexibility to go in the portal, get immediate impact. And then now, as we've spent a whole podcast talking about some of these prep guys they're getting as well, that very much in that top 50 now, even elevating the bar more. So happy for Phoenix and like the fit.
Yeah, especially they've had good guards, man. They've had some guards that really developed well. Like Chase Audige could be a good comp for what he could become eventually. Like they've done a really good job there. So, all right, that's all I got, Derek. I think we covered everything. Could be an exciting week ahead for Illinois basketball with Will Riley's decision, Terrence Shannon, potentially a first-round draft pick, a 2-day NBA draft now. So the first round is on Thursday, I think, and the Friday is the second round. I believe I have that correct. So hopefully we hear Terrence Shannon's name in that first round. But it could be another week, Derek, that signifies the growth of this program.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially Terrence going in the first round would be massive, and really checking that box first time since 2012, a really, really big deal. And I know that probably don't have to beat the drum too hard on the rafters conversation. That's come up more and more. I wrote the story here recently as far as Terrence goes. And I know that Marcus Damask even recently tweeted that out, put him in the rafters. So I think the case is pretty well accepted by Illinois fans. They think it's a no-brainer. And but yeah, Terrence being kind of in the realm of Io and Kofi, and even again updating a stat that has been a long time since Myers Leonard was picked. And yeah, I imagine we're probably going to be doing a podcast on Sunday for Will Riley. At least I got that written down somewhere. So could be a really good week for Illinois basketball, and that's my current expectation.
Yeah, I gotta give the wife a heads up about that. Sunday afternoon might need to clear the schedule a little bit. But hey, thanks to Adam Finkelstein for a great breakdown of Will Riley and what he thinks of Illinois and Terrence Shannon. Derek Piper, appreciate the insight as always, as well, my friend.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you to everybody for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcast, and check us out on YouTube. If you are right now, hit that like button, subscribe to us, hit the notifications bell. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer podcast.